What's up, guys? Sats Venture here. I'm joined by Anthony Pompliano, the founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management, an investment firm that partners and helps early businesses build and scale their companies. He's a long-time entrepreneur and considers himself a full-time investor. He's the creator and host of the Pomp Podcast, which features interviews with key figures from the business, finance, and technology industry. He's interviewed the biggest Bitcoin advocates such as Michael Saylor, Jack Mullers, and Anthony Scaramucci. He has acquired 1.6 million followers on X, a platform he has used to voice his conviction on Bitcoin. He's recently published his book, How to Live an Extraordinary Life, 65 life lessons that Anthony Pompliano has picked up on over the years. Letters to each of his children, an easy read that could change how you do life for the better. It's an absolute honor to have you here, man. I've been watching you for quite some time, so really appreciate it.
I'm super excited to do this.
So you served for 6.5 years in the military. What made you sign up for that military, and what was that experience like for you?
I think part of it was testing myself. Could I do it? Another part was it sounded fun. And then there was a third part, which I graduated early from high school. I was working 2 jobs at Quiznos and Chick-fil-A. And I realized that I needed some sort of accelerant to make sure that I didn't still end up working Chick-fil-A and Quiznos, 2 years later. And so I knew I would go to college. I knew that I had a lot of opportunity, but it was something that I thought was pretty important. In hindsight, there probably was something that was also pulling me from like a service mindset. Something I'm very glad that I did.
Yeah, what are some life lessons or experiences that you can share to young people today that you've got through the military?
I think leadership matters, and leadership isn't always about who is the most authoritarian. You have to be able to know what type of leadership to employ. And so at times you need influential leadership. You need to be able to motivate people to do things. I think that there's something around holding people to a standard of excellence. In the military, if you don't do things the right way, the cost could be somebody losing their life. And so obviously business or life outside of the military is maybe the stakes aren't as high, but still holding people to a standard of excellence. You find that the best people want that they're attracted to it. I think that there is something around teamwork and the ability in the military to kind of shoot, move, and communicate with other people is really important. In the business world or even in your personal relationships, understanding who these people are, what makes them tick, how do you communicate, how do you kind of navigate life together is really important. And then also there's an attention to detail that's needed and kind of a pride of ownership in the military. And so, in the book, I talk about one of the things that always kind of surprised me is when we would get off a mission, our job was to clean our weapon, but they never checked. No one ever walked around and was like, did you clean your weapon? It was just understood that you're cleaning your weapon not for yourself, cleaning your weapon for your buddy, because if you ever need to fire that weapon, it better work. And you're not going to probably be firing it to save yourself. You're going to be firing to save somebody else. And so that, kind of singular action that appears to be individualistic was actually an action of service. And so there was a high degree of trust because everyone believed that everyone else had, great attention to detail.
Yeah, awesome. I've actually read your book. I love a lot of those lessons, and I've listened to the audiobook twice, and I'm going to hit that pre-order for the book in December for Christmas. So I might be gifting that out to a few people. Where did you find yourself post leaving the military? And you sort of talked a bit about in your book starting businesses with friends and then eventually departing from them. So what sort of ended up starting that journey and those first few jobs that you sort of started?
My dad had a really big influence on me. He called me when I was finishing up college, and he said to me, okay, you went to college, you did the military stuff. Now it's like time to grow up. And so you either got to go get a job or you can create a job. And getting a job sounded horrible and creating a job sounded awesome. And so I was like, let me go figure out the create a job thing. And for better or worse, it was pretty painful. If I'd known everything I'd known, I might not have gone down that path. But very, very happy and fortunate that I did. And so that's really what kind of kickstart, what became a pretty entrepreneurial life.
Yeah, cool. You talk in your book a little bit about starting joining Facebook, and then you briefly talked a little bit about Snapchat as well. Could you just maybe talk to the audience a little bit what you did at Facebook, and then how you eventually left Facebook to do your own thing?
Yeah. When I went to Facebook, I started out as a product manager. I worked on Facebook pages, the growth team there. And so the goal was just get more people using the business product, right? You got to create a page to become an advertiser. And so how do you do that? From there, I then was brought over to a very small team working directly with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, how to grow their personal audiences on Facebook. I had a lot of lessons learned there. It was a pretty cool experience. And then before I left, I ended up on a team that is now called Social Good and Goodwill. And the idea was to use Facebook's massive scale, but don't worry about making money. Just do positive things in the world. And so we launched things like voter registration, Amber Alerts, and many other kind of products that I think people enjoy on a day-to-day basis, but there's not really a monetization to it for Facebook.
Yeah, cool. You've interviewed some huge players in the Bitcoin space. What's it like to interview Michael Saylor? Like, do you just treat him like all the other billionaires you've spoken to, or is there something different about him with his Bitcoin strategy and MicroStrategy?
It's nothing different. Everyone puts on their pants one leg at a time in the morning. Different people have different lessons. And when I talk to people, I try to learn something from every single person. Some people have different kind of eccentric behavior, or maybe some people are really high energy. Some people may be really emotional. Some people may be really low energy. And so part of interviewing is not only understanding who the person is and what questions kind of elicit the best information or the best answers, but also being able to read a person. And so you may ask a question, they start to answer, they mention a word and they kind of have a physical reaction, or their eyes dart to the side or something. And you're making a real-time call like, oh, let me go deeper there. Explain a little bit more about that. Is something that you kind of pick up over time. And so I think that we have published over 1,400 episodes on the podcast. And if you think about kind of just how much reps I've received, it really, hopefully I've gotten better at it over time. And so being a good conversationalist, being a good, kind of question asker is a pretty good skill to have. And you begin to realize that it's a lesson my wife actually taught me, that if you talk to someone and you don't learn anything, or you talk to someone and you think they're boring, it's because you're not asking good enough questions. And so you should be able to walk up to anyone on the street, and if you can ask good enough questions, you should get a really, really fascinating conversation going. And so it's your responsibility as the person asking the questions, whether the conversation is engaging or not.
Yeah, I've noticed that with, I think you were on CNBC this morning, or maybe whatever your time zone is, but and they still have this sort of anti-crypto narrative. Like, they really push back on you, and they bring you in, but you always have max confidence. And I love that you can dodge questions. They always want you to comment about the election, and I'm like, oh, they just want a narrative here, man. But I think it's awesome that you go on there like knowing that they're coming after you, but you're just like, bam, bam, hit them with the facts. So you seem to be a very good interviewer, someone that I'm trying to copy, because sometimes I seem to try and chop the questions too much, and maybe I need to deep dive a little bit more. I think,
look, with the CNBC stuff, it makes it more engaging. You don't want to have an interview where somebody asks questions and then they don't have an opinion themselves, right? And so even the fact that you recognize, okay, I'm going into the interview, they're going to push back, like that makes it engaging. It makes it interesting. And so there's a balance, right? When I interview people, I'll push back sometimes. I'm not there to argue. I'm not there to be rude, right? So, they've given me their time. I want to be respectful. But also, if they say something absolutely insane, I'm like, hey, come on, that's crazy. Like, explain that a little bit more. And so finding that balance is, kind of acquired skill, I think.
Yeah. With Michael Saylor, sorry, this is sort of jumping back to Michael Saylor, but one thing that I found extremely impressive, and maybe something that is a bit different with him, is he's still so quick-witted, like with his age and everything. Like, he can have such a long conversation, a long podcast, deep dive into huge topics, go on these huge rants, and it's like, I don't know. For my grandparents are a similar age, and you would not get a 3 to 4 hour interview conversation with them. And it's like some people just keep their minds so fast and so quick-witted for their age. Who's Jack Mullers to you? Like, so you mentioned something about your involvement with Strike. Were you early investor or are you a business partner? Are you guys friends or is he like a little brother to you?
Jack is an incredible entrepreneur. He's a great human being. I think he's someone who really cares about not only his team, his company, Bitcoin, and humanity in general. My relationship to Jack and Strike is I was one of the early investors, and at the time, I think Jack was long on kind of a vision and short on results, but we just really believed in Jack, right? And it was just, hey, we think that Jack is going to figure this out. And Jack has more than surprised us to the upside. To see what he's been able to build and kind of the global reach and the performance of that business is quite inspiring. And so I think of Jack as, a peer of mine who has been quite successful. And given, how much success he's had so far, he's somebody who I wouldn't want to bet against for the rest of his career.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love watching Jack Mullers and that he's got Dollar Bill on there with Dylan, and they always have a good time. He's a lot more unfiltered. Just goes ham, F the man, F all this. And it's just so funny. I love watching him. He's entertaining. But then when I'm like, I need someone factual, straight to the point, that's what I'm chucking on Anthony Pompliano. Very structured, very formal. And yeah, so it's good to get a bit of a contrast. This is like completely wild question, but I was sort of deep diving into who you are and everything online. How did you end up hosting an investment podcast with Bryce Hall in 2020? Because that was an absolute curveball for me. I'm like, because I knew Bryce Hall through I was on TikTok back in the day. And so, yeah, just tell us that little short story. You don't have to deep dive into it too much. And then what was your exit plan out of there?
Josiah, I got range, man. I got range. I met Bryce through a guy named Michael Gruen. Michael came to me and he said, hey, I think that you and this Bryce guy could get along. And I think that you guys should do a podcast together. So I met Bryce. I thought Bryce was a very smart guy. I thought Bryce, was very aspirational in terms of what he wanted to be able to do. It was very obvious he understood content and technology. And I liked that Bryce had a little bit of flair to him. He had a little bit of kind of hot takes, and he didn't necessarily care what other people thought about him. And so, while some people may think of that as a risk or kind of rough around the edges, what I saw was somebody who had confidence to say what they believed and to kind of live life on their terms, which usually I'm drawn to those types of people. The idea of the podcast was called Capital University. Basically, we would bring on super successful people. Bryce would get to ask a bunch of questions. I would help kind of mentor him to a degree and kind of facilitate some of the conversation. And, it was a pretty crazy experience. Probably my favorite moment of the entire thing was we interviewed David Rubenstein. David is a multi-billionaire who now owns the Baltimore Orioles, Major League Baseball team in the United States. He's also the co-founder of Carlyle, a major private equity firm. And David got on the podcast on Zoom, and Bryce showed up, and Bryce had on a white tank top with his hair and his chain and everything. And David did not have on that outfit. And so the first thing that David said is he looked at Bryce and he said, "It looks like you work out. Be careful." Or, like, look, I got, I'm strong too, or something to that effect. And so the dichotomy and the comparison of, billionaire in a sports coat, collared shirt, and Bryce ready to learn in his tank top was quite a sight to see.
Yeah, you guys had some big people on there. I watched quite a few episodes just for context, and like Mark Cuban, you had Anthony Scaramucci on. I don't know whether that's you pulling those influences, but he also has influence himself. So it's cool to have this business person and then someone that's sort of from that party influencer world, merging and then bringing on billionaires. Like, it's a pretty cool concept. I kind of wish that you guys kept it going, but I'm sure both of you went on different paths. You've always jumped from one job to the next or one investment to the next. What made you narrow in on Bitcoin and make it sort of your main focus for some of your channels and your Twitter page?
just was obvious to me that, hey, this has got a high probability of working and it's mispriced in the market. And so the more mispriced I thought it was, the more confidence I got to, kind of sink my teeth into it. And so as the price went up, I got more confidence that I was right, and just continue to stick with it.
Yeah, awesome. My dad runs a commercial mowing and land maintenance company that has more than 30 employees and runs off multi-million dollar contracts. How could he implement Bitcoin into the business going forward? It's obviously he's now hasn't ever even thought about that, and maybe he never will. But what could be something going forward? Maybe there's been rules and regulations stopping him from doing that, especially in Australia. But if things were to sort of switch and change, what could be something he could do? Maybe a strategic reserve or something. And it's not on a big enough scale like Michael Saylor, of course, but is there something he can do that implements Bitcoin going into the future?
Your dad runs Jim's Mowing?
No, he actually would hate me. He would hate me wearing this hat. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm not a fan of Jim's Mowing. I don't like Jim's Mowing. But
okay, cheers.
I think that using Bitcoin as a savings account, right? You have a business, you work hard, you create economic value, you want to protect that economic value. So storing it in something like Bitcoin, I think is a great strategy. And you got to be careful, right? You don't want to necessarily over allocate or become over leveraged with Bitcoin or anything like that. It's a volatile asset, but you want to put some portion of your balance sheet that you don't need for operating capital into Bitcoin, and then just let it ride. Just hold it for a number of years and see what happens. And people who have done that over the last 15 years or so have been quite happy.
So he would just, when he has spare capital, instead of investing it in more vehicles, more machinery, because often in the past, when he's not sure what to do with the capital, he'll just reinvest it into the business and just grow it larger and larger, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I feel like there's always been a defect of what do I do with the spare money? And I feel like
Bitcoin, you do both, right? You could easily reinvest it in the business, and maybe you come up with, hey, 90% I'm going to reinvest in the business, 10% I'm going to put in Bitcoin. And you just kind of whatever the thing is that works for him based on the risk profile, capital needs of the business, the cost of machinery, labor, whatever, and you just come up with kind of a framework, and then you just stick to it. And the discipline is actually really important.
Do you see a future where you can pay your employees, maybe using something similar to Strike or maybe something similar, where you can pay your employees and they can choose to receive it in the local currency or in Bitcoin, or do you think that's still a fair stretch far away?
People can do it now. They definitely can pay employees or whatever. I don't think it's super popular. What I've seen is like kind of remote teams that are adjacent to the Bitcoin industry. They seem to be the ones who are doing it most. But it's not really a technology problem as much as it is like a consumer use case challenge. How many people really want to get paid in Bitcoin? There's definitely some, but the majority of people still haven't gotten to the point where that's the preferred method.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Strike it's obviously more popular in the US, and there hasn't been a single person in Australia that's like, oh, I also use that. So I'm still waiting for like mass adoption over here. I feel like we're a few years behind the US, and even saying that, the US still has some steps to go. But I can't wait for the day where I can walk into like a Bunnings or the local supermarket and pay with my Strike and show my mates, because there's no barcodes or anything yet, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to use Visa and MasterCard anymore. Get me out of these big banks. I'm done with it. No, that's why I love listening to Jack Mallers, because he's just, he's a funny character.
He's doing a great job, and the fact that people around the world know him and know Strike means that the marketing's working.
Yeah, and I think he's taken a page from yours where he likes to travel and actually meet face to face. He's always in another continent, another country, just always on the move. And it'd be a dream of mine one day to actually be able to fly over and interview people and just chat with them. But for now, I'm stuck with this crappy setup. What's your advice to young men my age? I'm 20 currently, who are finishing school, finishing college, finishing uni, slowly entering the working world? What's some advice going into work, going into relationships? What's something that you can tell them at this time of their life?
Seek maximum risk. Just go find the highest risk things that you can do and do them now, because it will become harder and harder throughout your life to take more and more risk. And so you can use me as an example. In the military, like physical risk, doing that at 17, 20, 21, much different than doing it now as 36-year-old married with 2 kids. I'm gonna have a much harder time going now, right? I also think financially, what's the worst that happens? You're 20 years old, you take a massive risk, it doesn't work. Your parents will let you come hang out, right? Like, you got a safety net. If I called up my parents now and I was like, hey, by the way, me and my whole family are going to move in, may not be the same conversation. And so I think taking risk is really important. The second thing is, don't let the world beat you into a mentality of downside protection and safety. Because what they don't tell you is if you get into that mindset, it's really hard to come back out. So not only is it harder to take more risk, but if you go and you get a job at a big corporation, regardless of your individuals, you could still be a single 35-year-old, but you're so addicted to the salary, you're so addicted to the safety, you're so addicted to the free lunch that you never want to leave. And then you wake up and you're 50 and you're like, man, I never left. And so I think that it's like, go seek out maximum risk, but then also drastically avoid the safety of big corporations and things like that. And if you do those two things, then, you won't live with regret. You'll at least have tried the things that you wanted to try. And then after a couple of years, you can decide, do I want to keep doing this, or should I just go get, a big corporation job?
Yeah, something that I see very common among the young people around me is they finish school and they want to go to uni, and uni comes with all this, we call it HEX debt. And you can't pay that off until you reach a certain annual salary. And so people then are now going, oh, I just won't earn more than that amount. And so there's all this pressure to just stay around that, 50 to 100K annual salary mark. What's something that you can actually break out of that and actually have the motivation to maybe start something of your own, or, climb that hierarchy?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, they get caught in this world where they're worried about status, they're worried about hierarchy, they're worried about all that stuff. But the secret is, if you want to climb, you have to build. And so if you want to have a bigger job, if you want to have a more important job, if you want to get paid more money, if you want to have a higher position at the business, if you want to, upgrade the company you work at, the number one thing you can do is build. And so I always say that, like, results are the best resume. And so if you show up and you tell me, I went to Harvard, I did this, this, and this, but you can't tell me what you actually did in any of those places, versus the guy who shows up and he says, you know what, I didn't go to college, but look at this. I built an app. It was the number one app in the App Store, and it got, 5 million downloads. Like, dude, I'm hired. Like, they know what they're doing, right? And so it really comes down to what have you done, not where did you go, or, what businesses were you employed by?
Yeah, awesome. You've recently published your book, How to Live an Extraordinary Life. Can you tell the audience about what that book means to you and where they can find it?
Yeah, the book is 65 letters to my children. And I wrote it because I wanted to share life lessons that I've picked up over the years on money, investing, relationships, work, health, happiness, and many other topics. And the challenge with writing a book like that is you've got to be able to pack timeless advice into a book that's concise so people can read it quickly. But you can't pack the advice in a one-size-fits-all, because every person's situation is different. And then you also have to be able to make the lessons memorable, so that people, as they experience their life, are able to kind of recall them when necessary. And so it's a fairly difficult book to read or write from a structural standpoint. But from a writing standpoint, it's very helpful because you're writing for a single person. I'm writing for my children. I'm not trying to write for the world or for a bunch of different people.
Yeah, something that I heard you say with your wife recently, and she's a proper goes into the proper writing with all the descriptive words and the metaphors, and you're just like bang, bang, bang. And so I think
she would be like, I really enjoyed the sunny day and the, illustrious walk, blah, 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 whatever. And I'll just be like, I went outside, period.
Yeah, like I'm mad, and she's like, I'm fuming like the fire in the Canara, and it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I love that. So it's so good to listen to. I listened to it at work, and I just binged it. Boom, done. And then I could listen to it again the next day. But yeah, no, it was a really, really good listen. I recommend anyone to download that book on Audible or buy the physical copy from Amazon, and just support Anthony Pompliano. Lastly,
you should be like my hype man. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, with like the 10 subscribers that rocked up. Lastly, where do you prefer people to find you online?
Probably just on Twitter is the easiest thing. Just at a Pompliano on there, and I post everything, tweet about all kinds of crazy stuff, and frankly use it to learn. And so the more that people engage there, the more I learn, which is my whole goal.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for joining in. I really, really appreciate it. Absolute honor, man. Cheers.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, man.